What's up, guys? And I decided to make a video kind of talking about the final boss and breaking down how I played it, as well as giving tips and talking about different talents. And that video did pretty well, so I thought I would make one again for Sire. Um, Hopefully, it's just as helpful. Hopefully, it has just as much information and people can find useful things to incorporate into their own gameplay after watching it. And I appreciate you guys taking the time to click on the video and watch it. All right, taking a look at the talents I ran for Sire. This is basically the setup I ran, and I think it's probably going to be your best setup. You could go the route that the Limit Holy Paladins ran and do something like this. And the main reason they did this was because Glimmer of Light did not have really great synergy with Venthyr, and because obviously we're playing Venthyr at a high end level for the damage increase, they elected to go for Beacon of Faith, right? Especially because the tanks are taking a lot of damage. I didn't really like that. I liked this better. I felt like it gave me more spot healing without making my GCDs too cluttered. So that's how I decided to play it. I think the most notable talent is going to be Unbreakable Spirit versus Rule of Law. And the reason Unbreakable Spirit's pretty good is mainly just because taking Unbreakable Spirit will give you divine protection for every single blood price. And blood price is one of like the more difficult mechanics because if you're not topped, you could be in a lot of danger. So just having it for every single blood price is really nice. On top of the raid being stacked for the most part, the Rule of Law is not doing as much as it normally would on other fights. Obviously, you can run whatever you prefer. I elected to run Unbreakable Spirit just because I liked having more defensives. Holy Avenger, Divine Purpose, you can pretty much run whatever you want in that row. I liked Holy Avenger just because I felt like it lined up really well with some of the points in the fight where we struggled with healing. So I'd use it at the start, which is pretty healing intensive. Then I used it again when our other Holy Paladin didn't have cooldowns, and it was up to me to heal. So I used Holy Avenger, and that helped us smooth out our healing. And then I ran, I used it in the last phase when our wings were down, right? And that gave me a lot of consistent throughput at the dangerous points. And I'm really just not a big fan of Divine Purpose because I feel like it doesn't allow me to have a lot of control over my healing. It doesn't feel as good as it did before in BFA. So I definitely prefer Holy Avenger. Sanctified Wrath versus Awakening. I think Awakening is just better. Sanctified Wrath obviously gives you more control over your healing, but the main issue is that it kind of clutters your GCDs. It doesn't feel as good to use. And with Awakening, when you get those procs, it feels smooth, right? Your rotation feels smooth, and it'll help you give more consistent healing over the course of the fight, right? Just by having those procs to smooth out your healing and give you healing outside of just wings or your 2-minute wings cooldown. And then Glimmer of Light and Faith, I think that you can play either. I know that if your tanks are really getting destroyed and you're struggling to keep them alive, Beacon of Faith can be really good. I felt like our tanks were getting destroyed, right? But I didn't feel like it was really a problem, so I liked to go with Glimmer, just to have more raid healing, more spot healing. Alright, taking a look at our Sire kill. I started off the fight using Wings and Venthyr on the first Cleansing Pain. You want to use Venthyr early because it will carry over to both of the ad sets, right? Immediately following that, I have my Devo. You can sometimes time the Devo with the Night Hunters and the Blood Price to count it for both of them, but it's a very tight window, and I wouldn't recommend doing it unless you're like 100% confident, because it's a lot more important if you have your Devo assigned to a Blood Price that it's up for the Blood Price. Because I tried it this poll, I mistimed it by like 0.2 seconds. I didn't have it for the Blood Price, so we took a little bit more damage than we probably should have. I have Holy Avenger, but I save it for the next set of ads. I got really low here, and I didn't use my defensive. The main reason is that these beams, as long as you have enough people assigned, don't do a lot of damage. So you really can get away with being relatively low, but I was a little bit too low, so I decided to do a Holy Shock myself here, I believe. Yeah. Then I tried to top our Boomkin. He ended up living, but that could have been dangerous. Generally, though, if you're like 40% HP and you have enough people assigned, you're pretty safe. I pre-positioned to hit the gateway. I was lazy and I didn't have a macro, but I got it off anyway. Then once we get here, I use my Holy Avenger just to give us a little bit of extra healing, because this is the next like biggest ad set. After this, your ad sets generally aren't going to be that big. You're not going to have that many ads. So this is the last like super healing at the point of the fight, or the first phase, I should say. Something I brought up earlier too with Divine Protection is that if you're wearing Unbreakable Spirit, you can have Divine Protection for every blood price. It's not super important in phase 1, and I try to save my Divine Protection in phase 1 for the times where I might not be top for Night Hunter or I'm very low for a blood price. So I kind of use it a little bit more loosely in phase 1, but in the last phase it's a lot more important. I try to pre-run here. So you're gonna have wings come up. If you do the same cooldowns as me, that is, you're gonna have wings come up in about 10 seconds here. And generally, I think it's better to save it until after the blood price, just because it lines up a little bit awkwardly. On this pull, I used it, which I've done some pulls. Some pulls I use it, some pulls I don't use it. Just a bad habit. But this pull I used it, and it worked out fine, just because as you've seen a little bit, I got an Awakening proc. But I would definitely recommend using it after the blood price, because people don't take that much damage right there. And you are just losing a lot of uptime because you're in that blood price up in the air, not being able to cast anything. So as a Holy Paladin on this fight, you can safely get to the middle with 5 stacks, which means you only need to take one of the frontals. The key to this, though, is you have to use Freedom at the very fucking last second possible. So right here, I'm staring at his HP and at my weak core, and I'm not casting anything. Because you cannot be GCD capped, or you're going to miss it. So I'm waiting till the last second. You want to do this as close to the end of the cast as possible. So I'd recommend getting a weak core to track the cast as well, which is March of the whatever. So at the very end of my cast, I cast it. And that's why I was pulling GCDs. If you cast it too early, it's going to fall off before you get to the end. And then you're going to be slow as fuck and you're not going to make it. You're going to have to call for a grip. So it's super important they use it at the end of the fight. Then you go down. I like to use... I just like to use Door of Shadows to get to the first one. I actually got... This pull is a little bit bad. I don't know why, but I got super fucking disoriented. It was not optimal. But I like to use Door of Shadows here just because it's not as healing intensive, this one, because my other Holy Paladin had his wings, right? So I don't need to do that much healing. I can afford to get to this one a little bit slow. My tank calls for sack right before he leaps off. And then I kind of just try to move away from the edge, just get safe from the pools, and try to hit either the Baleful Shadow or Remoria. Right here is my next Devo, and this Devo is really fucking bad. It actually just does really nothing. The main reason I Devo'd here is just because it's the only place I could where it lined up. Obviously, you would want to use it somewhere else, but we changed our cooldowns kind of late into progression for the last phase, so I had nowhere else to use my Devo where it would be up in exactly where I want in the first phase and the last phase. This is the only spot. If I use it later, it's not going to be up for where I wanted in the last phase, so we just kind of had to use it here. And we didn't want to adjust cooldowns entirely for the first and last phase, or just because I had to swap my Devo, so we just had this low value Devo. Also here you have Impales coming, and you can impale these, you can bop these Impales, which is super helpful. You generally want to try to target people who are like, who can immune it. So your Boomkins, your Warlocks are going to be your highest priority. On top of that, you could do your healers like your Priest, your Selv, even the Shaman. Hunters and Mages, you don't want to really bop just because they can immune it, right? And we always had our immunities here for this set. So Mages and Hunters immune, we try to bop Warlocks or Boomkins. Once we get here, I use my Holy Avenger as soon as it comes off cooldown, just because this is pretty healing intensive, and my other Holy Paladin has no cooldowns. So I kind of need to do a lot of the healing here. You also want to try to output as much damage as you can, just because of this being one of the DPS checks. It's not too bad, but definitely try to weave in some damage. Obviously, don't get knocked off or don't get hit by a Massacre in that process, though. This is where I use my second Venthyr and my wings. It's probably the only like good value spot you can use Venthyr in the phase too. Our other Holy Paladin uses Devo here. So I positioned it pretty poorly here. As the boss moves and I don't move with it, I just kind of started hitting the Kabbalist, which is okay, but it left me in a situation here where pools were dropping and I didn't feel confident running to the boss. I don't like moving too aggressively with these pools because it's a super simple mechanic and I'm not trying to get knocked off and waste the battle res, right? It's better I just play safe. So I wait for pools and then I move to boss, dodging Massacre in the process. pools again. It's kind of hard to see with Venthyr. Like, it's not easy, so you just really got to focus on that. Even if your healing suffers, when that Venthyr goes down and you're dodging pools, just pay attention to that. It's not worth the battle res, and no one's going to die in that 2 seconds it takes you to just watch your feet. Right here is the next spot where it gets healing intensive. We don't have any cooldowns if you copied mine. The problem with using like Venthyr here is that you just move very quickly, right? You're only there for like 10-15 seconds, so you're losing half of that time. Our other Paladin uses Venthyr here, and it's not great. Like, we're only going to be in this one for like 20 seconds, if even that. But he just has nowhere else to use it if he wants to use it in phase 2. He could opt to just use it twice, once in the first phase and once in the end phase, but he decided to get 3 uses, which I think is fine. I know Limit, one of their Paladins only played for 2 uses. This part of the fight's not too bad. Once again, just watch your feet here. I think it's unacceptable to die to those pools there. So that's your biggest thing, is that just the fight's not super healing intensive here. No one's in super strict danger except for the tanks. So just keep your eyes on your feet, man. Like, I don't think I can stress that enough, how important it is to just not get knocked off. It's such a dumb death to have on Prog, and it's just such a waste of time. Massacres is the same thing. Don't be greedy trying to get cast off or trying to melee the boss. If you have to step out of range of the boss to get your cast off, to not die, then step out of range of the boss. Your raid is not going to wipe because you missed 2 or 3 globals being out of range of the boss. It's better to be safe there. Main difference here in compared to like Heroic and Mythic is that if you're in the downstairs realm, which is generally the melee realm with the tanks, the boss pulls you forward here. See, we get knocked through the boss. So that's just something you need to keep in mind through all of your positioning. This blood price, you'll see that I use Divine Protection, I use Devo. This is where my Devo is assigned. Divine Protection in this phase is up for every single blood price, which is super nice. As I went into, I might have talked about it earlier, I'm not sure if I did, but these blood prices will fuck you if you're not topped. Like, if you are not topped, there is a very high chance you die. So having that Divine Protection for every single one is super important. And you could theoretically have it if you were playing Rule of Law too, but you wouldn't have it in the first phase. And plus the raid is pretty stacked that I don't think Rule of Law is super necessary. I like having more access to my defensive because there's so many ways for you to just be in a lot of danger in the first and last phase. I use Wings after this first blood price because the debuffs come out. Your main focus here, like, all these people might be low, sure, but you need to make sure the person with the debuff, in this case it's Dova, is topped. If they're not, they're going to take a lot of damage once it goes off. Yeah, it just hit him for 70% of his HP. They need to be topped, and you need to top them after, because that dot they have is going to hurt a lot. And if they're soaking one of these debuffs, or one of the orbs with the debuff on them, they're going to get absolutely destroyed. So Shattering Pain here, I try to position myself, of course, so you don't want to ever get knocked in the range by the orange marker. So you just got in position so you get knocked away from them. Obviously, same thing as before. You want to keep your eyes on the people with the debuffs. They're about to spawn again. Make sure everyone who has them is topped. I use Sack here. Something to note is that if you're like have Sack and you have the debuff or you're soaking an orb, you're taking a lot of damage and it can be super scary. So I think it's something we did was if I had Sack on Shaz here, I would not soak one of these orbs. So you'll see me just not even bother going to soak. Or actually, I did go to soak this pull because I think I felt pretty safe. My HP looked good, so I felt like, okay, I can go soak. If I had like the debuff from the orb and Sack and trying to soak one, I would just die. So just keep that in mind. Just be careful about how much you're doing with Sack up because it's very easy to just get extremely demolished, and you want to save your health pots and your health stones for right before the blood prices in case something goes wrong. That was a nice awakening proc to get us topped. So when we get to this overlap here, if you get the orb, it's a little bit rough. You have to try to make your way to the massacres and get to where you're supposed to drop it. If you don't, you can play pretty safe. You don't have to get to the orbs right away. So you just see all of us melee just playing safe, not trying to get to where we're supposed to be. We're just staying alive through the massacres, and then we rush over. Like, when I watched this VOD back, I wish that I had charged and got to help soak the orb, but we didn't have issues here. We never had issues here on Nate Pull, so it wasn't that big of a deal for us. But if you are, use your charger and get back to the orbs to help soak. You'll see me just align to not get knocked off. We soak easily, so it wasn't a big deal for me. But if you're having those issues, you should use your charger and try to help, and then just turn around to face the boss so you get knocked that way. Also, next blood price. This is a really tough overlap because you get it right after the orb soaks and right after the shattering pain. So you need to try to top. You need to prioritize people that are going to be in danger, right? So I know that I'm going to be in danger because I'm 60% HP. So I prop my divine protection and I word of glory myself, and then I holy shock our mage who's also in danger. I think we have Devo here, so I didn't really have time to get many other GCDs off, but we have Devo, so people should live, which they did. Once we drop down, I believe I use Holy Avenger. I do. And same thing as before, I'm prioritizing the people who have the debuffs. I go out to soak. I lost, I think, a GCD here, but I just wanted to make sure we got the soak done. And then I tried to position myself so that I didn't get knocked into the range. This is like the hardest part of this phase. There is a shattering pain during a massacre, but thankfully on Paladin it's super easy. You can just bubble it. And it will immune the knockback and immune the massacres, right? So he starts the massacre and then he's going to do shattering pain. We just press bubble and we just walk to wherever we want to be. You don't get knocked and you just have to drop these. I got the debuff here, so you'll see me just run over to place it where it's supposed to be placed. And then I go back to my spot. I didn't soak there because I had the debuff. And if you have the debuff, you generally do not want to soak. We like had the rule in our guild, if you have the debuff, don't soak because you're just in too much danger. Obviously, if you feel really safe, you can do it. Position yourself so you don't get knocked off, and you don't never get knocked in the range. If you get knocked in the range, you're just going to kill us both, right? So I just get knocked through the boss. Blood price again, you want to frantically top everyone. And because I decided to use my divine protection on when I got the orb set, I didn't have it here, so I just need to be 100% topped, which I was. This is not too bad. Like, the third blood price is not too bad. It's honestly the first and the second that I think are the roughest ones because you don't have that much time to top everyone off. We soak this set. Something you can do and something I've done in like our rekill is you could just charge her out and you could just charge her out to get to that back soak. I didn't do that. I went for the close soak, and I even misplayed it a little bit because I didn't think about the shattering pain right after. So at this point, these last set of orbs you drop, you're not soaking them. So if you get it, you just want to drop it away, but don't run through anyone that's gonna one shot. And as long as everyone's top tier, you can literally just start blasting the boss. Like, every single global can be used for DPS here as long as everyone's healthy. I actually sat on Holy Power there, which was a misplay, but we killed the boss, so it worked out well. Our damage was pretty good. But in your case, if no one is in danger for this last bit, like, no one here is going to die. Everyone's healthy. Just start blasting that boss because the DPS check can be tight, and we've wiped to like 60k HP before, which can be literally 2 or 3 DPS globals from an old Holy Paladin can make the difference. But that's it for this kill. Alright, that does it for this video. If you guys made it this far, I want to first say that in the description below is a link to all my socials, my Twitter, my Twitch, as well as the Icy Veins Holy Paladin guide, which I write. And I try to keep updated as soon as my guild finishes progress with all the tips and talent suggestions that I used. And second of all, thank you for watching. I very much appreciate all the support I've been getting through my Twitch and through the channel.